Part 2, Chapter 2 of Short History of the Christian Church by John Fletcher Hurst. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2. The Reign of Charlemagne. The process of centralization north of the Alps began with Charlemagne. His rule was the signal of death to the tottering Roman Empire. It was also the first prophecy of the ascendancy of the new Gothic nations of the north, and of their firm place in the later life of Europe. In him the old classic conditions disappeared, and the new political life began its career. Charlemagne, called by the Germans Karl der Grosse, ascended the throne on the death of his father Pepin, in the year 768. He divided with his brother Carloman the Frankish Empire, Charlemagne taking Austrasia, Neustria, and other parts of the eastern Frankish dominions, while Carloman ruled over the western parts, or France and a large part of Germany. Carloman died in 771, and Charlemagne united his own empire with that of the rest of the family, and claimed rule over all, without regard to the rights of his brother's family. The soil was now prepared for the new European life, the Church and the State working hand in hand for universal dominion. Charlemagne's methods were the creations of a masterful shrewdness. He regarded himself as a theocratic lord. His notion of himself was not that he was a mere successor of Constantine or Augustus Caesar, but of David or Solomon, the head of a vast theocracy. But the Roman bishop must not be offended. He must be outwardly treated as high priest, though Charlemagne secretly regarded himself as the real possessor of the highest religious functions. But the pope must be made to feel that his rights were respected, yet, at the same time, must remember that kings and conquerors have their rights, and that without temporal rulers there can be no successful and safe church. Towards the pope, Leo III., he acted with unfailing respect, and was at the same time constantly receiving from him such favors as strengthened his hold upon both his subjects and the Church. Charlemagne's motto was, "The Church teaches, but the emperor defends and increases." To Leo III. he made the following declaration of their mutual relations: "It is my bounden duty, by the help of the divine compassion, everywhere to defend outwardly by arms the holy Church of Christ against every attack of the heathen, and every devastation caused by unbelievers, and, inwardly, to defend it by the recognition of the general faith. But it is your duty, Holy Father, to raise your hands to God, as Moses did, and to support my military service by your prayers." Leo III. accepted this declaration in the most complaisant manner. The preparations had been laid in the preceding movements. Rome was constantly at the mercy of the bold and ferocious Lombards. They threatened to sack the Holy City, and possess themselves of its vast wealth. In 734, Gregory III. induced Charles Martel to help him against the attacks of Luitprand, king of the Lombards. Again, when Charlemagne's father, Pepin, was aspiring to destroy the Merovingian dynasty, Pope Zacharias gave his official approval to the deposition of the Merovingian king, Childeric III., and in this way caused Pepin to be placed upon the throne, and to become the founder of the Carolingian dynasty. This obligation of the emperor of the Franks to the pope was never forgotten during Pepin's reign. Later, Pope Stephen II. personally visited Pepin in France, and secured his pledge to come down with his army and defend him against the new Lombard chief, Astolph, who had invaded the Greek Exarchate, a group of 5 cities and the interlying territory along the eastern coast, extending from Rimini to Ancona. Astolph was also besieging Rome. Pepin defeated the Lombards a.d. 772, took possession of the Exarchate himself, and appointed the pope as patrician of the Exarchate a.d. 754. The pope was thus made a temporal ruler. It mattered not that the Exarchate was a part of the Byzantine Empire, and that protests were made against it. Pepin gave, and Stephen II. took. This was the beginning of the temporal sovereignty of the papacy, which only came to an end after a reign of 11 centuries, or in 1871, when Garibaldi and Victor Emmanuel marched into Rome. The final and complete cementing of papal and imperial interests took place under Charlemagne. Desiderius, the new Lombard king, invaded the pope's territory and laid siege to Rome. Adrian I., the now reigning pope, appealed to Charlemagne for help. It was given, and Charlemagne invaded Italy with a great army, and defeated the Lombards. He confirmed and enlarged the previous gifts to the pope, went to Rome, and was received with great pomp by Pope Leo III. By a clever piece of stage management, in the midst of the magnificent Christmas festivities of the year 800, Leo III. Advanced towards Charlemagne, and placed upon his head a golden crown, with these words: "Life and victory to Charles Augustus, crowned by God the great and pacific emperor." It was a well laid plan, and faithfully carried out. The bells from the many domes of the Eternal City preached the new gospel of the brotherhood of pope and emperor. The multitude shouted their glad acclaim, and the city ran wild with new joy. The meaning of the coronation was clear enough. Charlemagne had lacked the endorsement of the Church. He had long coveted it. Such an attestation of his imperial rights would forever silence the claims of his brother Carloman's children, and give him such prestige as would defy all opposition. Then, as compensation for his vast papal service, he enlarged the papal territory and placed the papacy itself, as a temporal sovereignty, on a plan entirely new to history. The later relations of Charlemagne and the pope were fraternal, always a part of the general policy of mutual advantage. The emperor was no sooner crowned than he threw off his northern costume and put on the tunic, the chlamys, and the sandals of the Roman. When he came to leave Rome, and Leo III. Exchanged kisses with him, and he was lost to sight behind the hills of the Champagne, Europe entered on a new career. The Northern Empire was to strengthen and protect the papacy in every emergency. On the other hand, the papacy must give its spiritual approval to the empire. Beautiful as this management appeared, it had its dangers. Each was slave to the other. The papacy could only be upheld by imperial arms. The empire would be in constant danger of strifes of succession without the participation and coronation of the papacy. The time came, later, when it would have been convenient for both parties if Charlemagne had never seen Rome, and no pope had put upon his head the crown of the Caesars. End of chapter 2.